Reminder on the board, bring your laptops Thursday. I think I mentioned this last week. Optional, you don't have to. If you do have a laptop, definitely bring it if you could for the lab on Thursday, for the spoofing lab. That'd be great. And you will be getting software as well on Thursday. So bring something to hold that in. I think I'll have it in a paper container for you, but probably a good idea to have a CD case or something. So we're going over Chapter 4 tonight, and then homework-wise, you got Chapter 4 review questions, topic review, quiz. Week 4 lab is on access point spoofing. We'll actually be doing the we'll be doing spoofing on IP using IP sorcery, and it's on the CD you'll be getting, as well as Mac spoofing. Okay, we're going to do both of those on Thursday. And the CD I'm going to give you actually the software runs right from the CD. In fact, the whole operating system runs directly from the CD. You boot your computer from the CD and it runs directly from that CD. The STD Knoppix software. So this week we're talking about network vulnerabilities and attacks. It fits really well with the lab we're doing Thursday, which has done a lot on spoofing that you'll find out more about on Thursday. But spoofing actually is just one of the many vulnerabilities that a network can have, and attacks that you can have on your network. Spoofing is just one of the many. And there's a lot of tools that you can get. Some of them you'll learn Thursday what those tools are that hackers use to actually create a spoofed IP address and a spoofed MAC address. So this chapter goes over some of the vulnerabilities on a network. It's not exhaustive by any means. This chapter is not. The book that you guys have, they literally have volumes on just vulnerabilities alone. So it's not exhaustive by any means. It categorizes the different types of attacks that a network could have and then defines them. So there's two broad categories of network vulnerabilities. First is those based on the media itself. Like Thursday we're going to do some on Wi-Fi and wired both. But you could, and those are the two main medias that people attack networks from, because that's what your network's connected to, whether it be Cat5 or wireless. And then also found in the network devices. We talked a little bit about this already, but you can have laptops, handheld devices, like say for instance a lot of stores have, for inventory purposes, have these little handheld devices that go around and scanning items. Those can also be hacked into backdoored into servers, and so those are just a few. One of the tools you'll get on that CD on Thursday, there's a lot of tools on it, but one of them, Ethereal and EtherApe, allows you to, especially EtherApe, gives you a graphical interface of all of your network traffic at that time, whether you're on a Wi-Fi network or a wired network. And what it does is, on this EtherApe, it actually gives you a, well, just for some of those tools, and that's called EtherApe. It's just one of them, one of the many. Monitoring computer. Every server room is going to have some computer in there, they should, that has all the types of monitoring software, some of the stuff you'll get on Thursday. One being like EtherApe, you know, where you go in and software that actually puts feelers out on the network to find open ports, ports that are trying to be flooded by pings from other computers outside the network or internally. Because there's sometimes people install software that, unbeknownst to them, will flood the network with pings because the software is trying to reach a website or something continually and it can't reach it, so it just keeps hitting it. That can cause major traffic issues on floors or on building and whole buildings if there's enough of that software, you know, saturated. And there's software that you can install that actually goes out and finds these instances, and if it reaches a certain level of pings, it can shut the port down immediately and give the user a message that says, you know, please contact IT, whatever the case may be. Your network traffic has been locked down, or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it's again something they didn't, you know, try to do or mess up. They just download a piece of software, or a software that's already on the computer messes up and something happens to it. So, but this screenshot basically just shows a computer somewhere on your network that is a monitoring computer only. It doesn't have to be a hefty computer, doesn't have to be a server, just a computer running monitoring software. And you maybe have seen this before, but we do a tour at the end of the semester in the IT lab where we've got 5 or 6 flat screen monitors that might have 5 or 6 apps per monitor showing activity on the network. And some of these softwares are pretty high tech. Some of them, like we're going to use this semester, are all open source. The ones that are more high tech, what they allow you to do is not only graphically see, like EtherApe, what's going on, but you can literally right click on it and maybe shut the server down or restart a server or whatever the case may be. Different commands you can run from a right click within a graphical environment. And so a network administrator or a network monitor, there are jobs just to monitor the network. Swedes had one open up a while back, and all you did with third shift was monitor network traffic. That's all you did. And do reports and things they didn't have time to do throughout the day. And so monitoring in a network environment, depending on your size organization, more than likely you won't have a full-time person for this. You'll be doing it. Now, will you be able to sit in front of it all the time? No. But you have it in your office, in your IT department, to where it's graphically available at any time to view. And then if there's an issue, you can just walk over and see what's going on. And so we'll learn more about that software Thursday when we give it to you. But it's on the network. Again, just to monitor all traffic and what's going in, what's going out. And this is just a screenshot of a protocol analyzer. And basically we use a number of these. We use one actually on Thursday. And it shows the traffic source IP address, destination IP address. And what we'll show you on Thursday is, when we do this lab, you'll start out with your own IP address on your computer and find out what that is. Your neighbor will fire up a piece of software, spoof your IP address, run this software, and your neighbor who spoofed your IP address will send multiple packets using another piece of software called IP sorcery, that you can send packets to a destination IP address, and you'll see a flooded IP range or IP address of multiple IP addresses of the same IP number going down that source IP address that is not you. It's your neighbor doing it because they've spoofed your IP address on their computer. But this type of software can find anomalies like I just mentioned. There are ways to harden your network, which we talked about last week, to limit spoofing from happening, meaning a spoofed computer or an IP can only come from no more than 2 locations, because that's pretty normal in an administrative capacity anyway, to maybe have 2 records of an IP address throughout a month's period of time. You might be logged on 2 separate computers or whatever the case may be. But then after the 2 limit, then it blocks all further other IP addresses from other computers or other devices immediately. Because not only do servers keep logs of IP addresses and MAC addresses and their source and how long they've been connected and the history, it also ties to MAC addresses and IP addresses, computer names, also attaches to them manufacturing name and other variables. That is impossible to be spoofed. And so there are ways around hardening your network, which we'll talk about Thursday, ways to harden a network from being spoofed either from a MAC or an IP address type of scenario. The next is media-based. Okay, in this room, all of the wires run through the floors. In fact, this whole building, all the Cat5 cables and fiber optic run from room to room under the floor. You have a 3-foot circumference clearance under all floors. In the IT lab, they actually have suction cups you put on the floor and then pick up the tiles to be able to work and run wires and things of that nature. But it's enough crawl space to run wires. So this building's pretty secure in that aspect. But there's some offices and companies that have their Cat5 cables maybe running over a false ceiling, just maybe on top of a false ceiling. Those are definitely prone for attacks like this. Easily grab a Cat5, put a RJ45 on it, cut it, and put an RJ45 on a cut Cat5 cable and connect to your computer. Takes minutes to do that. The other one is there are devices that allows you to crimp Cat5 cables, and if you know how to crimp them correctly, you don't have to even cut it. You just crimp it, and you get connection of all the wires to connect to it. Okay. Wi-Fi. Now, before I get to the Wi-Fi, or if you when you walk around a building when you guys leave tonight, like go downstairs, you know, like if you're leaving out this door here, look at the ports where the Ethernet plugs into, the Cat5 cables plug into, especially downstairs. I know Tavis plugged them up. You can get locks for those. You can get locks for ports that are not in use, because again, easily for people to plug in and begin to, you know, try to create havoc. And so wired, you definitely can lock down from, if you don't have a floor circumference like we do, you can run cables via PVC pipe, which I recommend doing. And all by itself, you'll run Cat5 all by itself within a PVC. A few years back, I helped a friend of mine. We ran about 850 feet cable, about 450 Cat5 cable, 850 feet of PVC. Just ran it down the hallway and just started going at it and creating RJ45s and getting RJ45s and crimping them together. But we ran it, you know, in a PVC pipe over a false ceiling. But it's definitely more secure than just running it in. Oh, you know, I've seen them where they're just, you pop a ceiling tile up and you just see them exposed. So if they're enclosed in a PVC pipe, which generally the PVC pipe's the way that we did it, and you'll see it done a lot this way, is they'll take the PVC pipe, say this is a server room here, and the PVC pipe will actually come into the server room. Then you'll see the bunch of wires come down from the PVC opening. And you won't see another opening until you get to an area in the room that is a secure area, like a closet that's locked in a room. PVC pipe comes through that closet and then down and in connectivity into all the computers. So there is ways, media-based. This one shows tapping into using called a network tap. It's a man-in-the-middle attack. Man-in-the-middle attack can be a device like a laptop, an iPhone, a Droid phone, just to name a few. And the laptop can be Mac or PC, it doesn't matter, Linux. And if you have the right tools, you can tap into pretty much any wired network if you're actually physically attached to that network, which is pretty scary if you think about it. It's kind of like the example I always give is, okay, you've got locks on your door at home, hopefully, right? But what if, for instance, the keys to your door were posted all over your lawn and trees and different locations throughout your property to where just about anybody could grab and go and use and get into your house? That's what the equivalent is of a Ethernet cable being exposed in a work environment that doesn't need to be exposed. So it's a simple walkthrough. Do we need this? Do we need this 4-port Cat5 connector in this room or in this hallway? If you don't, you can get locks for it and lock it. The locks are pretty reasonable, not too expensive. I don't recommend disabling the port because you might need it in the future, but you can get locks that lock the actual ports from being accessed. So that's wired. Okay, mainly when you're dealing with wired networks, you're dealing with Cat5, which is in the back of the room, the white cables hanging down, which is called straight-through cables. My pct110 class are actually creating the white and the red this Thursday. They're doing straight and crossover cable both. But those are fairly easily accessible in buildings that do not have them running through a floor or through PVC. The next is fiber. Not many buildings have fiber running from computer to switch to server. They have fiber only from switch to switch and from server to server because of cost. So you're going to have a problem usually in fiber. Now let's talk about wireless. I saved that to the end to discuss. Wireless can be is better. It's much better security-wise now today than it used to be. WPA2 security and TKIP security protocol has made it much more secure and harder to hack. One of the labs we show you this semester is actually hacking a Wep Key. It takes seconds with the right software. But if you have WPA2 at home, either personal or enterprise, you're pretty secure for most hackers. They don't have the tools to do anything with that. What they usually look for is a Wep Key. Wep Key is the least secure type of authentication for wireless networks. Yeah.
I'm just curious, when you're sitting outside somebody's house and you're scanning the different wireless ones, and it says, it's security enabled, does it tell you that it's Wep or WPA?
Oh yeah, you can tell exactly what type of security is applied. And so what they'll generally do, ward drivers is what it's called, where you ward drive them, drive around, and there's actually a piece of software we play with this semester, I'll show you. Ward driving actually does that. It just goes by, it looks for open networks or Wep enabled networks. Those are the first top two they look for. And then there's a conference in LA every year where they actually just do that. It's a good conference. What it does, they go around ward driving. You bring your laptop. It's got antennas. You go around, drive around Vegas, and you spend a whole night driving around Vegas and trying to get as much data from open networks, Wep secure networks. And at the end of the drive, you come back, gather the data, and then they kick the data back to business folks in the town to give them a grade of how they're doing. And then they do contact the individual folks on where, you need to make this more secure, and here's why, and here's how to do it. Because sometimes, it's a insurance company, and there's one office with one guy. He's got a laptop, and he's it. And he didn't go to network school, and they're not going to pay for somebody to come and do it, so he's got to do it himself. He went to Walmart and bought at that time, when they first came out with Linksys routers, the default was, open, totally open. It's not that way now, which is nice, but, a lot of people had open Wi-Fi networks because of that. It's gotten better, though, over the years. I'll get information on that conference. They change it periodically, and maybe some of you might want to go. Maybe it's kind of cool to go to that. So on the iPhone that I use, what it does is when you get through driving around Rockford, it actually puts dots on a map, and then on those dots, you can actually see open or closed networks and what their IP addresses is and where they're located at. And there's a number of apps that we'll kind of look at.
One more.
Yes?
On the network tap thing.
Uh-huh.
If they're watching their network, are they going to know that you cut into their wires? Or
No.
They're not going to know?
No. Not unless there's an anomaly of some type, or it caused disconnection or some type of interference with that. So a lot of times they're not going to know. Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, you can a lot of times cut a wire, and as long as that wire is not connected to another computer, they're not going to know. And so, most of the times these guys that do it, and this is not done a lot. It's not done a lot because it takes a lot of know-how. Number one, number two, very illegal because you're having to break a premises. You have to go and break property, premises, break into the building, ceiling, whatever. So it's not done a lot, but it is done, and you'll see it done a lot in corporate buildings, high rises, where wires run a lot through closets, and then people will get a job as a janitor or some maintenance because they have access to all the back doors and hallways and boiler rooms, and that's where all this stuff usually is run. And you'll see a lot of times that it'll be attempted there, because here they're getting in through a job, right, a valid job to do something illegal. So you'll see it done in that way. So, but network taps can be used. And as some of the stuff I've already mentioned, laptop, hardware device, it could be as simple as if you have the right device, they even have components now to where it's kind of like the size of a. Have you guys seen the new Apple TV, iTV? The little black box. Let me see. It's about this size, right here. It's about that wide. That's about it. They have boxes that have been hacked to where you can plug a Cat5 in to a box. It's a Wi-Fi device. You just plug it in, say, boiler room somewhere, plug it in, and then, you know, it has Wi-Fi built in, so where you can basically plug it into the wall, power, plug it into the Cat5, two steps, leave it, and then connect to it outside the building immediately and do whatever you need to do. That's one way as well that it's done. Now, Wi-Fi, though, is probably the way that hackers get into networks today. All right? There are ways, as I already mentioned, securing Wi-Fi, one being TKIP security, which is one of the protocols that we'll learn this semester. WPA TKIP. They have enterprise and personal, both. The problem with that is this. You still have a lot of old wireless devices out there. Okay, what I mean by that is, say a business has some laptops that have Windows XP with an old NIC card in it, an old wireless NIC card. They're not going to be able to talk to a WPA security. They won't even be able to connect to it. Okay, it'll fail every time. So, the option companies have is you can buy external USB wireless cards, fairly reasonable, but if they're so cheap they won't do that, then their opt-out basically is Wep Key, which sad to say it's what most of them do, just because it's backward compatible to old and new, you know, old new NIC cards basically. And so unless companies either buy a USB, and I can see that, I know the reason why they don't want to do it. You say you're a sales guy, you got an older laptop, everything's fine on it, it works great. Oh, by the way, here's a USB external Wi-Fi device you need to connect, you know, to your laptop to do your work. Their initial response is, ain't doing it. Okay? That's what they say. And it's human nature. I'm not doing it. Yeah, but I don't care. I'm not doing it. Okay? Give me a better reason than we don't have the compatibility now or whatever the case may be. And so the logic you have to give them basically is share real life stories in ways they understand of hackers coming into a business, stealing data. You know, that's how I go at it is, we don't want your data stolen from your laptop or somebody to compromise your network, you know, your laptop, and they could do that on a web connection. It is possible to do that. Yeah.
Well, I have a U-Link router at home, wireless, and one of those came with it, the USB, but it has the MAC address right on it. So if I was to lose that,
exactly,
then you could go online, download the software, install it on your computer, put this in, and you got an instant approved connection.
Exactly.
Even if you MAC filter your...
Right, exactly. Especially if that device is used for like a VPN connection that uses a MAC address from that Wi-Fi device. Yeah, you're right.
So if they lost it, I mean, I'd rather have them lose the laptop.
That's another liability too. Yeah. Now they'll never mention that to you, but yeah, from an IT perspective, that's definitely liability. And so, you know, in my mind, if you're going to get higher security Wi-Fi, which I think you should have, either buy the devices at work that are secure or don't use Wi-Fi, because it's not worth it, especially with sensitive data. You know, definitely, like some of these places, you know, and Rockford's high in this area of patents. Rockford's got tons of businesses that have a lot of patents, either pending or old patents that are sitting on the server. You don't want just people getting into that. And so, you know, definitely a lot of companies, because of the security issues, are saying, okay, we'll leave Wi-Fi open for guests as they come in to get to the, you know, Google and Facebook or whatever it is they need to get to, or Gmail or whatever. But internally, we're not using it. Or if we do use it, everybody that uses it is going to have the the best and greatest NIC card to use it and apply it. And usually, like we do at work during the day, they've got their SSID hidden from anyone to view. They can't, it's not broadcast, and so they have TKIP plus it's hidden, plus a really long password. And so a lot of companies go for that too if they are going to use it. It's very minimal now. Today it is. Companies really don't trust it still. It's getting better, but it's more. Wi-Fi is actually consumer level right now still, and cafes, public Wi-Fi. But as far as robust, secure, not yet. It's getting there though. And I think it's not because we don't have the technology and we don't have the security. It's they've got to get everything up to speed, the component-wise, to match it. And so it'll happen though, for sure. Within 5 years, I think it's going to happen. Well, let's talk about some of the media-based floods that could happen. Switch flooding. This is where an attacker can overflow the switch's address, MAC address, and fake it, and make the switch act like a hub, sending packets to all the devices immediately. MAC address impersonation is what we're going to do on Thursday. The attacker of device X can pretend to be device A by sending device A's MAC address to the switch as if it were his or her own address. Fake network redirect. If two computers are on a network, a different logical network segment, device A must send its request to talk to device B through the router, although an attacker on device X could send a fake network redirect to device A, claiming it should send device B's packet to device X. And so this would be a fake network redirect, kind of like a man in the middle almost, but not quite. And then router advertisements, because routers routinely send advertisements of their presence. In fact, they do every few milliseconds. An attacker could pretend to be a router and sending false router advertisements so all devices send packets. Because here's how it works on network connectivity on your NIC cards. Your NIC card's looking continually for a router. Continually. It's looking. And what they're saying here is you can actually set up devices or software that fakes itself to look like a network or like a router. It's constantly putting its feelers out there all the time. And if your network is kind of slow or sluggish and you've got some robust system here that's the hacker system, it'll actually look for the one that's more robust and begin sending data to that after a period of time. It might take a day or 2 days or 3 days for that to happen, but it can happen over time with the router advertisements. Equivalent of this, I guess, would be, okay, you've got a Wi-Fi network at home, right? How many's got Wi-Fi network at home? Okay, great. It's set in your laptop, the name, right? The SSID of your network at home. Say, though, your neighbor gets a newer, stronger router than what you've got, meaning stronger signal, and it's just kicking it out. I've seen it to where even though your computer knows your SSID, if that router is stronger in the signal coming towards your laptop at the time, say, for instance, wherever you're standing, your router is way on the other side of the house, and your neighbor is maybe 20 feet from you and has a stronger signal, sometimes your router will, or your NIC card will actually see that one, even though this one's right there, as you open up your laptop to see it. It'll say, and you might go, I don't know, where's that SSID coming from? Same type of deal. Now again, we just say cancel, no connect, but that's what's happening. Your NIC card's immediately starting to fire to see what's out there. It sees a stronger signal, even though it sees this one. It sees this one. This one's going to be a stronger signal. It's going to try to say, oh, do you want to connect to this one? Same type of deal for NIC cards. And then fake device redirect. An attacker can pretend to be a valid network device by sending a fake device redirect to the switch. Oh, here's a fun one. Weak passwords. You would think 2011 that everybody and the brothers got a secure password, right? That would be the logical thing to think, right? But that's not true. Most workplaces, it's not a some, but most will have passwords either on a file called password somewhere on their network, or users still put passwords on underneath their mouse pad, underneath their keyboard, or a sticky note right on their monitor. Okay? Every workplace, I'm talking from CIA down to McDonald's, okay, will have this going on. So password is real crucial to network security. Now, from a network security perspective or network admin perspective, you can force a user to, number one, have such and such type of password, alphanumeric, length, all that good stuff. Secondary, you can force them to change it every 30 days. But what's the problem with that? What's the problem with the first scenario? What do you think the problem is? Can't remember it. That's the first thing you hear, right? Ain't doing it. That's okay if you're hearing it from, a peer of your that you work with. But if you're hearing that from the CEO, it usually ain't happening. Okay? Whether you want it to or not. Okay?
Want to get an exception.
Exactly. So, can't remember, it's number one. Now, on the changing password, which a lot of businesses 2-3 years ago were doing all the time, that's kind of went away. 2-3 years ago, just about every major firm was having users change their password every, 30, 60 days. 60 days max, usually. But those same companies have limited that because password, don't remember it. Or how do I change it? And ITs were flooded with that response. And so there are tools, though, one of them being a software tool. It's a Microsoft software tool. It's a third-party one, but works with Microsoft, where you just sign in once. It's a once sign-in appliance. It's a hardware device on your network that allows users to set up every application that they would ever log into throughout the day. One time, they go through and sign in all those areas. And then this device locks down that connectivity, and the user from that point on, when they log in every day after that, logs in once in the morning on their local computer. It syncs with this hardware device that then any other website, application that needs a username password comes from this device versus them physically typing it in. That's another way that, like here on campus, I know a number of administrative offices have done that, to go away from them physically having to change it themselves every 30 days, 60 days, yada, yada. Now, the initial password, though, that they have to set has to be a secure one, but they only have to remember one versus, some people have, 15, 20, 30 passwords, possibly throughout their day's work, or they're prompted to enter in a username password that many times. So this one sign-on compliant or device really works well for some areas. But passwords definitely should be used that are, somewhat difficult, are not a book name, they're not your family, anybody in your family, dog, address. I remember Dennis the Menace and Walter Matthau. Walter Matthau played in Dennis the Menace movie. I remember there's a scene in there where he's got a safe behind him. He's watching Dennis for the day, and Dennis is bored and it's raining, and he looks at the safe and he goes, "I bet I know what your password is on the safe, or your combination." He goes, "No, you don't." He goes, "If you're like me, it's probably your address." And he looked at him, and you could tell by the look on his face, he's dead on. It was his address. And, but, 90% of people are like that. They use something that's, about them, their person, to create a password. And so education is important from an IT perspective. There are utensils, the utilities, like one I mentioned, the one sign-on utility. The other one is, there are websites, too, that can allow people to create passwords fairly easy. and some of them we'll go over this semester, some websites to go to do that. Also, the expiring a set a period of time, and a new one must be created. That one, I think, still needs to be done periodically throughout a business. Now, there are some rules you can set up on that. The one I would stay away from on a rule for that would be the rules that say the password cannot look anything like the old password. I've seen them like that. You can do it like that. Meaning nothing in that password, you know, the word or numbers can look anything like the old one. That's a little much to ask people. It really is. But what you can do is, and the way I've trained users is basically say, okay, say whatever your password is, add 3 or 4 numbers on the end of that, and then just change those numbers each time at the end. Whatever logic you want to use, and give them some examples of ways they can change it, different logic they can use to change it, and then go that way. That way when they do have to change it, they know the word and they're changing that number at the end. Make sense? So, and even if they have to do it monthly, it's something easier for them to do. So one thing you don't want to do without showing them examples of how to do it, and what a good password is, there's tons of resources out there to help you figure that out, as far as, you know, educating people on what a secure password is. So characteristics of a weak password, commonly used, not changing passwords unless forced to do so. Passwords are very short, personal information is used, using the same password for all accounts, and writing the password down. These are definitely of a weak password. The other is a default account. Every local computer and even server have a guest account, right? When you set up the OS, like Windows 7, Windows Vista, disable it. Disable any guest accounts whatsoever on a client or network. Number one, do that immediately. These default accounts are used to make the initial setup during the setup process, and that's generally all they're used for. That's what they're designed for. But it's amazing how many people keep those on or turn them on for whatever reason. And unless it's a public kiosk of some type, probably a good idea to turn those off. And it says here all of default accounts are intended to be deleted. Often they're not. Default accounts are often the first targets an attacker seeks, a guest account type. Here's some examples of a password or passwords that are definitely very bad examples of secure passwords. Okay, password, you know, again, that's the number one password that people use today that's weak anyway, is the word password. Numbers, 3 or 4 numbers of the same number. Service, QServe. Back in the 80s, late 80s, it was popular for admins to have username God for their username. And then password, something, you know, like, you know, iceberg lettuce or something like that. You know, something really stupid and weak. Okay? But because they're God, they cannot ever be hacked. Back then. Backdoor is another vulnerability. We've talked a little bit about this. You've heard of this term. This is basically a networking, an account that is secretly set up without your knowledge, that cannot be easily detected and allows for remote access to the device. Here's an example of a backdoor username that is not easily detected. All right, I'll give you one. This is a 2s_ASP.NET. That's a common username. Default ASP.NET is for .NET Framework. Here's another one. Admin by itself. Even administrators are afraid to touch that account because they don't know who set it up and why they set it up, so they're not going to touch it, believe it or not. Now, administrator, that's the default administrator name, right? But an admin, you'd be surprised how many hackers will create an account name called admin. It's never touched. Because it's so close to administrator, the administrators, plural, don't want to touch it because they don't know which administrator, singular, created it. Okay? And one of the things you'll find out in networking is most IT folks will stay out, admins anyway, if we were all admins in here, we stay out of each other's area, right? We don't want to get in each other's business, whether it be networking or what you're doing. So that's one reason why that account name is not touched. And that's used a lot as backdoor accounts, believe it or not, admin. Backdoors can be created on a network device in two ways. The network device can be infected by an attack like a virus, worm, Trojan horse, or a programmer of the software itself can create a backdoor on the device itself. An example would be online games. Online games that are free have tons of backdoor type of softwares in them to do havoc, create these backdoor accounts. Because one of the things that you have to do in a lot of these softwares is create or do a I agree button at the end of the install. And what that I agree button is actually doing is allowing that application to be run and to be able to do whatever it wants to as an administrator. That's what it's doing. You know how you can go into Windows 7 or Vista, have you ever done this, and had to right click and run as administrator for some applications? That's what this is doing, basically. It's a backdoor allowing this application and anything it does to be in administrator mode. That's pretty scary. Meaning it can do whatever it wants to do at any time it wants to do it. Whether it be get a remote backdoor remote into the computer at 3 a.m. in the morning, or to use that computer's bandwidth, which that's a popular one that these games do. Say they have 1,000 softwares installed on 1,000 people's computers throughout the U.S., and at 3 a.m. it begins to use all the bandwidth of those computers to do whatever it wants it to do. So, online games free, that's the number one way. Privilege escalation, this is possible to exploit a vulnerability in the network device software to gain access to a resource that the user normally would be restricted from attaining. This one's generally not done as much as the last one I mentioned, the backdoor through software. The backdoor through software or a Trojan horse or virus is generally how it's done. This one's not as prevalent. So we'll end on the categories of attack. One is denial of service, spoofing, man-in-the-middle, and replay attacks. Denial of service has been around a long time, and it basically is an attempt to consume every resource on a network to halt it. So at the time of its most weakest state, it could then go in and do its damage after the attack has been occurred. Now, if you've ever set up web servers before, this is one of the first things you'll turn on that basically doesn't allow outsiders to come in and ping your server to create a denial of service. Because you'll learn Thursday, there's softwares out there that you can actually type in a destination IP address, type in a packet size of say 100 megs, and I want to send a 100 meg packet to this IP address every 3 milliseconds for the next 24 hours. Okay? Well, if you don't have the denial of service or the not be able to ping checked on your web server, it will continually ping it until it floods it. But a denial of service cannot happen, or not happen as easily, if you have checked on that server when you're setting it up. This server is not allowed to be pinged. You cannot ping this server. That's actually a setup process on a server, a Windows server. Now, DDoS, distributed denial of service, is a variant of the DOS attack and may use hundreds or even thousands of zombie computers and a botnet to flood a device with requests. A lot of times what this is, when it's talking about device can be a web server, which generally that's what it is. It can also be a web service. Okay, a web service would be news feeds, video feeds like YouTube, iTunes. I'm trying to think of what else. Any other media you guys use besides iTunes and YouTube? to get music or video. Oh, I know. Hulu, that's a good one. Netflix. It's happened to all these people I'm mentioning. Netflix has happened to. Hulu's happened to. Do what? Cougar.com. If it hasn't happened, it's happened tonight, right? But basically, these softwares go out and they create zombie computers. And the denial of service attack can actually be, again, used in a software that creates it. A backdoor, free game. I mean, there's tons of free stuff out there. People like, if they get an email that says it's free or a website that says it's free, for some reason they have to click on it and download it. It's free. I mean, it's marketing 101, right? Anybody sees free, it could be dirt. Okay, dirt that's laced with, I don't know, cyanide. It's free, we're taking it. Okay, whatever. So same thing with web apps on this one. A lot of it's, or peer-to-peer networks downloading stuff they shouldn't be downloading. This screenshot basically just gives a DOS attack, what happens. It just keeps, this shows 6 computers or 5 computers hitting a server. Generally, though, it's not 5. It's in a DOS attack, it's 1. But we could say this might be a DDoS example, multiples. But anyway, what it's doing is basically just keep hitting that server, hitting the server, hitting the server, hitting the server, reply request, until basically it's flooded, and it slows it down, locks it for havoc to happen on the back, a backdoor to come in. So an attacker floods a wireless Wi-Fi router with an RF spectrum, and there is software on that CD you'll get Thursday where you can do spoofing on Wi-Fi and do spectrum type of floods. Basically, a spectrum flood's a lot like a ping on a hardwired, like me pinging your computer. Spectrum flood's like that. It's a computer pinging a router's IP address over and over again. Then a legitimate user comes in, says it's too busy to respond, can't connect. All right. Here's where the man in the middle attack happens. See the guy on the right? It's a legitimate user disrupted. What happens is the guy on the left, at the time where the disruption happens, the guy on the left maybe has a rogue router set up on that laptop that's close to the same name of the router that's too busy. An example would be the router, the SSID of this router might be, this wireless router might be, say, AT&T, as an example, right? It's a popular one, right? He names his AT&T Wi-Fi or whatever, AT&T Public in all caps. The user sees it and it's available after this busy response hits, and the guy on the left doesn't turn on the Wi-Fi, the AT&T Public, until a number of users are denied service from this attack or from this real, busy. And connects and turns on his rogue IP address or rogue router, and all the legitimate users now connect to it. Once they're connected to it, they have a screen that pops up that says, again, looks a lot like the AT&T agreement thing that you might be seeing at Starbucks if you ever go there. Get free Wi-Fi. Have to click I agree. When I hit I agree, it's a JavaScript applet that allows them to, again, have admin rights to every machine that just hit I agree. And it might even say that in the fine print. I mentioned this a week ago or whatever. It might even say that. If you click agree, I can basically do whatever I want. And when they do that, that's when they go in. Maybe they've installed a keylogger immediately on all their computers. I don't know. Whatever they want to do, really. It's whatever he wants to do. And so you can see how easy it is, especially at places like Starbucks, that McDonald's, that have free Wi-Fi, for this to happen. It happens all the time. And before I go on, I guess, let me go. Their work, schoolwork, work from home, whatever it is, work on the road. And they could definitely be an attack from this. Now here's an example of an access point, another example. of different computers going in and having to wait certain microseconds to get access. During the wait time is where other access points can come in, rogue access points, and do connectivity. Kind of a man-in-the-middle type attack. This one here, an attacker sends a forged disassociation frame. The valid device disassociates itself from the IP address, and then maybe, again, the guy on the left has a rogue IP address, rogue router that sets up for connectivity purposes. Now, how many people is going to notice AT&T has now changed to AT&T Public? If it's free, I don't care. You're right. I mean, that's the attitude, isn't it? If it's free, I don't care. Is it secure? I don't care. Right? I mean, because they don't really. It's not. I don't think they don't care as much as they don't know what it could do to their computer. If they did know, they probably would care. Now, I'm going to end on this spoofing, and we're going to be done. Spoofing basically is impersonation. Pretends to be someone or something that they're not. Variety of different types of spoofing. Attacker may spoof her address so that the malicious actions will be attributed to a valid user. Okay, you go home tonight, you've got a Wep connection at home, and it's open. A guy drives by, connects to your Wep connection, and it's open connection, and begins to download child porn to his laptop, or whatever the case may be, some legal activity. And then you are then knock on the door, comes to your door the next morning or a week after, your computer's confiscated, you're thrown in jail for child pornography. And they've got a log record of it. It's your MAC address, it's your IP address, it's from Comcast, and they have all this information. That's going to, like I said, it's going to take a long time for you to battle that, okay, if it wasn't you. And so it's going to take a long time for you to battle that. And so these are things that definitely happen all the time. An example also would be connecting to an open network and doing bank transactions into the Cayman Islands. You're funneling funds from one bank to the other. And I believe it's still, in the U.S. anyway, you can, as long as it's under $5,000 increments, it's not flagged by FBI, CIA operatives to see what's going on. And so it could take a while for that to be caught. And then when it is caught, maybe a month went by and all this activity has been happening on your computer from, say, midnight to 3, and you didn't know about it because of this, impersonation, somebody acting like they are you, doing whatever. And then another one is the attacker may spoof his network address with an address of a known or trusted host. And then lastly, an attacker can set up his own access point, I've already mentioned in here, and trick all wireless device communication with the imposter device. Anytime you see a Wi-Fi SSID that has anything in caps in the name, never connect to it. 9 times out of 10, it's a rogue device or some device that's definitely not a valid access point for you to want to connect to. That makes sense? Because a lot of times these hackers think that caps makes it really professional. It doesn't. or it's really, this is really the one you want to connect to because it's all caps. All right? And so same with emails and all this, bad spelling and all that good stuff. So if it's misspelled, for sure, red flag. If it's in all caps, definitely red flag. Never connect to it. And they usually say something like free public or free Wi-Fi, public free Wi-Fi, something like that. That's definitely a red flag to watch for, not connect to. So Thursday, when you guys come